Is Atlas Network's 2014 Templeton Leadership Fellow. Please welcome Garry Kasparov.
Thank you very much, Brad. I'm very excited to be associated with Atlas Network because we share the same beliefs in liberty, in freedom, in individual rights. And it's my first appearance. There's 2 more to come. I'm looking forward for a big event in New York in November, dedicated to the 25th anniversary of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. And today we'll talk about the Berlin Wall. And of course, it's good to be in San Francisco. It's the Bay Area. I guess it's an interesting combination of the most capitalist place on earth in Silicon Valley and some of the country's most socialist politicians. A very American contradiction. And speaking of local contradictions, yes, as was mentioned already, a few miles away from here in Cupertino, Apple has announced its latest gadgets and updates. I'm sure you heard about it. There's a bigger iPhone 6. It's smaller, bigger, bigger again. And despite its predictability and despite the minor impact on the economy other than Apple's stock price, the news of this event will receive far more media attention than SpaceX or Tesla, and definitely more than Ukraine. Apple is considered one of the most important and innovative companies in America, and so in the world. But does an innovator and leader sit on tens of billions of dollars in cash instead of investing it in creating the next big things? I love gadgets and I love my iPhone, though I have to admit I cannot handle it as well as my 7-year-old daughter. But when you can't tell the difference between things being called revolutionary, we have lost touch with what innovation means. In an America where values have shifted from risk to safety, steady cash flow with no surprises is what passed for innovation. Of course, as someone from a country where we used to stand in line for bread, I find it a bit strange for people to willingly stand for hours in line to buy a phone that is nearly identical to one in their pockets. And referring to my origins, many people do not know that, in fact, I was born in the deep south right next to Georgia. Yes, that's, of course, was the deep south of the Soviet Union, in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, right next to the Republic of Georgia. I probably completely lost my southern accent. The title of my lecture covers a lot of territory and not just Berlin. As someone who looked at America through the Iron Curtain, I have strong feelings about the relationship between the importance of freedom at home and caring about freedom globally. Understandably, Americans are tired after 2 long and painful engagements in Afghanistan and Iraq. Most do not want to hear about America's responsibilities or the importance of standing up for human rights around the world. But when you betray the notion that freedom is worth defending everywhere, you begin a very dangerous path for America and for the world. If it matters at home, it matters everywhere. Even if you want to be cynical and isolationist, it matters very much for the US economy and for US jobs. The United States, Europe, and other democracies thrive with global stability. Dictators like Putin and other thugs, especially those with energy resources, thrive with global instability. Western leaders saying they must focus predominantly on domestic issues are short-sighted and only postpone the inevitable conflict. Economic growth requires stability, and that cannot exist when Putin can annex a chunk of a European nation with impunity and launch an open military invasion of eastern Ukraine. It's familiar pictures. I'm quite annoyed when I hear people telling us that Putin is too dangerous and Russia is too powerful to challenge? Is Putin today more dangerous than Joseph Stalin in 1948? When Harry Truman saved West Berlin by ordering the airlift of supplies to the besieged city for 11 months, American and British planes have been flying over, making sure the city can survive. And it was done against the advice of all his top generals. And by the way, Joseph Stalin hasn't shot a single plane because he knew that Harry Truman was not joking. He already used nuclear bombs. That's the only language dictators understand. And what is lacking today in the world is leadership. Leaders willing to stand after dictators who only respect strengths. Ronald Reagan had two things more recent free world leaders lack: principles and the credibility only principles can provide. It's obvious that you have to learn from your defeats. But from my professional chess career, I learned that it's not less important, though less obvious, that you must also learn from your victories or become complacent. Because if you win, it means somebody, actually many more, they've lost. And they're learning from their defeats. And next time when you face them, they will be more prepared. And unless you learn from the game, where you also made mistakes, there's no such a thing as perfect game. If we won, it probably means that our opponents made the last mistake. So it's very important to learn, and unfortunately, the lessons of the Cold War were quickly forgotten. When the Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West, led by Bill Clinton, decided to celebrate instead of analyze. And soon after, Francis Fukuyama wrote his famous The End of History, How Liberal Democracies Are Won for Good. Let's look around the world today. Is history over? In Iraq, in Syria, in Russia, in Ukraine? ISIS, I'm not sure it's correct pronunciation, whatever it is, ISIS. I don't care how it's pronounced, its nature is the same. ISIS and Putin are very different threats, but they're also very similar in how they grew as America retreated. They also have in common that neither will just go away on its own. And left alone, they will only get harder to deal with, as it's always the case with thugs and dictators. The price, if you delay, keeps going up. For many years, I compared Putin's Russia to the mafia, to Mario Putin's godfather. The only thing that mattered to them was loyalty to the boss, staying in power to continue looting Russia. But now, after 14 years in power, actually almost 15 years, and the failing economy reaching the oppressed people despite high oil prices, that is changing. A dictator of one party has become a dictator of one man. A regime with no previous ideology has begun to adopt fascist rhetoric and policy based on ethnicity and purity. A Russia with an oppositional foreign policy has become openly aggressive. One-man dictatorship with fascist and racist rhetoric invading Eastern Europe, it's a familiar mix. But even without the obvious and frightening historical parallels, this is an incredibly dangerous transformation, and like a cancer, it will be much harder to stop the further along it gets. And it will not be stopped unless the West, especially America, the leader of the free world, wakes up. You cannot retreat forever and expect your country, your economy to suffer. Threats like ISIS and Putin are destroying the stable world order that US greatly profits from. So where can you go? You cannot build a wall and tell Apple and Google and Facebook not to do business in the rest of the world. Globalization is an American success story, and it must protect its interests or wither. I believe that the Cold War was not just won because of American technology or the disastrous communist economy. It was also values, what the whole world calls or used to call American values. For those of us behind the Iron Curtain, we knew people outside generally cared, that we were not alone, that Americans believed individual liberty was for all and not just for those lucky enough to be born into it. Is that true today? Reagan said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction, so we cannot take it for granted. I'm currently working on a book project I never had time to finish. Its central theme is the shift in American values over the past 4 decades. Reagan's shining beacon on the hill of my Soviet youth has moved away from freedom agenda both domestically and internationally. The traditional American values of liberty, sacrifice, risk-taking, and even faith have declined. On the rise are safety over risk, equality over excellence, comfort over sacrifice, and hyper-partisanship that fights harder and harder for smaller pieces of a smaller pie. The working title of my manuscript is a little shocking to some, especially for people of all generation. I call it un-American. But it's perfectly accurate. I'm myself literally un-American. Also, I'm proud to now live in the United States. But the title un-American also comes directly from dictionary, adjective, not characteristic or consistent with American customs, principles, and traditions. And in my opinion, there is much about the America of 2014 that fits that description far too well. This is a tragedy not only for Americans, but for the entire world that has depended on and learned from the United States, its economy, its military, its technology, its moral leadership for over a century. And this list summarizes what I view as a shift in the values in America over the past 40 years. Not coincidentally, the traditional values on the left symbolizes bold foreign policy and moral leadership, but also true innovation and rapid economic growth. Risk, excellence, sacrifice, faith, unity. These are the values of individual liberty, of the free market, of the American dream of providing a better future for your children. They have slowly been replaced by a dream of security without risk, of dependence on the government, of partisans' battles over a shrinking pie instead of growth that allowed for win-win negotiations. Trying to repair the damage of nearly 2 generations of value shift with policies that attempt to enforce equality will only make things worse. Trust me, I'm from a place where everyone was supposed to be equal or else. And it wasn't as nice as some of today's liberal commentators seem to think it would be. Margaret Thatcher said that the United States was unique because it was the only nation founded on an idea. Not on ethnicity, not on ancient borders, but the idea of individual freedom. And by the way, on this day, on September 9, 1776, the American Continental Congress declared the name of the new nation to be the United States of America instead of United Colonies. So it's historically appropriate date to reflect on what this nation means. American exceptionalism is meaningless if you only worry about jobs at home. Then you are no different from Germany or any other country. If you don't stand for something bigger, something based on principles, and defending them around the globe, you are not a leader, just one of the increasingly crowded field. America was, is, exceptional because it believed in good and evil and in accepting the burden of moral leadership. Not just following treaties to the letter, but fighting for what is right. The world is shrinking. The bad guys, the terrorists, and the dictators hate American values and fight against them because a Pax Americana is the end of them and the environment that produced them, and they know it. Retreating will not end the threat. America, as a global symbol of liberty, will always be their target. And now something about younger generation, as we talked over lunch. Also some familiar pictures, though I'm not sure everybody knows the game. Angry Birds. As I said in the start, when you look at the news today, it will be all about the latest Apple gadgets. So it's also appropriate to think about what that means for America and the world. NASA landed on the moon in July 29, 1969, and very few people recognize that at that day, the entire computing power of NASA was the size of one iPhone. 3,500 IBMers worked there. They had access to this amount of computing power. And they could come up with impeccable products, the software that could calculate trajectory of bringing man to the Earth and actually bringing them back safely. So when people ask me, so what can we do today? Because the young generation, oh, everything has been already discovered, you know, what's left? People 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, they didn't have access to the same power. It's all about your creativity and imagination. And if you know how to use it, the sky is the limit. But the problem today is that we are trying to avoid the risk. So risk-averse mentality has been dominating in our society. Just imagine for a moment Christopher Columbus or Fernando Magellan are asking for venture capital. So will they survive, you know, the preliminary due diligence process? Do you have a map? No. Do you know where you're heading for? No. I have just a vague idea that something is there. Next. So the moon venture also was quite risky. And by the way, I always thought at one point that if America had the same computing power in 1969, probably the computing process would show that the risk of losing the crew would be 25 to 30%. Can you imagine any US president authorizing the mission with 25% chance of losing the crew? It happens because, okay, the chances for Magellan and Columbus to survive were probably 1 out of 1,000. But we cannot move forward, you know, without the risk. Risk was paramount for the success of this country. What were the chances of those who went westward to survive? Okay, we don't want to say that. But they succeeded. Many of them died, but as a nation, we prospered. And at the end of the day, all these risky endeavors, like moon landing, produced a huge boost to American technology, to American industry, and to American confidence. Many of the things we use today, it's a result of of the space race, of the moon project, including internet, GPS, and everything else. It's not about landing on the moon. It's about the side effect. It's about the periphery. That was important. And that's what America was always great for. So a strong America is good for the world, and a strong America needs a strong economy. That means a return to risk, to real investment in big and difficult things, and a return to the values of innovation. We have the power right here in our hands. And aiming high, believing in yourself, and the power of your desire to change the world, all those things are essential parts of citizenship in a democracy, especially the greatest one of all. Thank you.